All right, it is 2:01, so we'll get going. Thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lisa Helps, and I'm the executive lead for BC Build's project origination. We have joining us for this info session Robin Jerry, who is from the BC Build's redevelopment team, who's been leading the feasibility work. Rod Hill, who is the director of redevelopment in the City of Kamloops, as well as Jay Tier and James Dements from the Ministry of Citizen Services, who is the landowner. So the purpose of today's session is for us to give you an overview of the opportunity that is just been posted and for which we are seeking a developer, builder, and owner operator. So I'm going to start just giving a high-level overview of BC Builds and how this process works. And then Robin's going to walk you through the high-level details of the feasibility study, in particular, the site concepts that we'd like to receive proposals on. Then I'll ask Rod and James if there's anything that Robin and I have missed that they might like to share. And then the rest of the time is for all of you to ask questions. This session is being recorded so that anyone who is not here but who still wishes to learn about the site has an opportunity to do so before the proposal call closes. And we really encourage you to ask as many questions as you can. There's no dumb question. There's no question that shouldn't be asked. And we'll do our very best among the team of us here to answer the questions. So this is a BC Builds opportunity. And for those who aren't familiar with BC Builds, it's a program of the provincial government housed at BC Housing, which is meant to deliver middle income workforce housing. So it's not an affordable housing program or a supportive or subsidized housing program. BC Builds is really about building housing for workers. And this particular opportunity at the Columbia precinct in Kamloops is specifically an opportunity for a nonprofit owner operator to partner with a developer builder to develop, build, own, and operate 2 buildings. So this is a really good and a really big opportunity. BC Builds brings a number of elements to the project, and from today, after you hear about the project, we're going to be accepting proposals until the 20th of September. At that point, we will, together with the Ministry of Citizen Services, review all of the proposals, select a successful proponent, and by that we mean a complete team. So we want developers and builders to team up with a nonprofit owner-operator. We'll evaluate the proposals as a whole, and we'll then select a successful proponent. At that time, we will ask all of us, BC Builds, Kamloops, the Ministry of Citizen Services, and the successful proponent to sign what we call a conditional land contribution letter. And that outlines what all of the parties will need to do from the time that letter is signed until we get the building under construction, the first building under construction, within a 12 to 18 month period. So that's the first key element of BC Builds is the pre-development period happens really quickly. What BC Builds brings to the table during that 1-year period is the potential to fund and finance the project. So just want to be really clear when you're building your pro formas, when you're putting together your proposals, please go to the website, BC Build's website. We've got our financing rates. Everything is up there. Assume when you're building your pro formas a 35-year amortization. The construction rates and takeout rates are up there. And then also, and I'm going to explain this as clearly as I can before handing it over to Robin to talk about the site, but I know there will still be questions. So that's good. Please ask the questions. BC Builds can also potentially bring grants to the project. And you'll see when you read through the feasibility study that there is a per unit grant that we know is necessary to make this project viable. Proposals will be evaluated on how low the per unit grant can get based on your own creativity, your own contributions, etc., while still having the project pencil out and work for the BC Builds formula. So on that note, because this is going to be a building that's owned and operated by a nonprofit society or a co-op or a First Nations Development Corporation. We have that as a very broad category. 80% of the units need to rent at market, so market rates for Kamloops, and 20% of units need to be at 20% below market. So BC Builds can bring in a per unit grant to help reduce 20% of the units to 20% below market. And so when you're building your pro formas, when you're calculating, how do I figure out my grant amount? Well, the feasibility study will help you. So this is the first project where we're actually posting with pre-feasibility done. So everyone's got that document as a bit of a cheat sheet. But then when you're building out your pro formas, the per unit grant amount is to get 20% of units to 20% below market. However, the grant itself applies to 100% of the units. So it's basically a construction offset grant. So the grant doesn't just apply to 20% of the units, it applies to 100% of the units. So that's just a key piece of information we really wanted to stress at the beginning, because it'll become clear why that's important as you look through the feasibility study and you build your pro formas. So that's a little bit about the process. It's a little bit about BC Builds. I'm now going to hand it over to Robin, and she's going to bring up some pages from the feasibility study and walk through the very kind of specific elements that we're looking for on this project. Robin, over to you.
Just give me a second to share my screen here. Okay. So as everyone is most likely aware, the site is in Kamloops. It's located at the corner of Columbia Street, a major thoroughway, and then what would be effectively the Fifth Avenue extension. This sort of goes the length of the precinct property all the way down to another BC housing project sort of off the photo here called Glenfair, which is predominantly a seniors housing building. It's directly east of the Kamloops Law Courts, which provides a sort of particular context to this project in terms of ensuring that the justices can continue their work during construction, during development, and also have what has been mentioned as sort of a more private sightline from the development. Maybe I'll enlarge this a little bit, just to ensure that they retain privacy while they're doing their work and making calls. So that's sort of why we are demonstrating this site plan, as this is sort of the preferred site plan that was discussed in between ministries. So overall, we estimate that the site could likely yield, with the current built form, of a 2-building multi-phase stick frame construction, approximately 186 units. We also have an agreement with Citizen Services, by which we are seeking to replace the existing office and provide approximately 40,000, give or take, of office space, which would be a grade, and that would be in both of the phases. Approximately 28 stalls in phase A and 30 stalls in phase B of surface parking, and then there's another sort of partial underground layer of parking in each building, and those parking stalls would be predominantly utilized only by the residences. In terms of context, is that sort of sufficient, Lisa, or would you like me to keep going? We've got further site plans down here, which sort of demonstrate some conceptual renderings as to how we anticipate the site to be allocated. There's ongoing discussions associated with improving roadway access and ensuring that there's limited queuing that would impact the operations of the courthouse. So this is still an ongoing discussion between the city, Citizen Services, and BC Housing in terms of how this roadway exactly is going to look. So just bear in mind that this is sort of a conceptual rendering.
That's a great overview. Thank you, Robin. Just a couple more things to add before I go to James and Rod to ask if we've forgotten anything. The office space that Robin mentioned, BC Builds can construction finance 100% of the project cost. So when you're thinking about how to make this project work, you don't need to worry about bringing in capital for the office space. And then the office portion of the building will be covered by the lease rates that Citizen Services will pay to the building owner. And everyone should read the property opportunity notice very carefully, and in particular, the section on additional property information. We're looking for competitive proposals where the lease space is covered off by the lease costs, but of course having those lease costs be as low as possible, because these are government offices and we want to make sure that we're not gouging government to create the public services that we need in all of our communities. And then just one final thing that I'll say, and actually, Robin, if you could take down the drawings, that would be great. The whole purpose of this Housing Development Opportunities platform is to create de-risked sites. So this site has been zoned for what's in the feasibility study. That's a key part. So please stay within zoning. And then in that 1 year period I talked about, from the conditional land contribution letter being signed to the construction starting, the developer the developer team that is partnering with a nonprofit will be responsible for securing the development permit and building permit and any other entitlements that the city requires. Again, this is all laid out very clearly in the property opportunity notice, but please, when you're building your proposals, not only stay within zoning, but we've worked very hard with the Attorney General and the courthouse that the footprint of the buildings that Robin showed is pretty much the footprint of the building we're looking for, specifically with that second building drawn back away from Fifth Avenue, so that, again, as Robin said, the justices have room to work and do their work without citizens kind of gazing into their chambers. So James or Rod, anything that you wanted to say that Robin and I have not said? And then after that, we'll open it up to questions.
Sure, I can add a bit from the city side. So as far as the city applications, the only thing really directly applicable that you'd have to go through for sure, it'd be the development permit area application. There's 2 development permits that are applicable on the site. One is the downtown DP area, and the other one's the multifamily DP area. We're currently just in the process of going to council to get that whole procedure delegated to staff, so that quickens the time frame for that. That'll avoid having to go to city council on it. And the zoning that Lisa mentioned is P4 public and institutional, but there's site specific amendment to allow the multifamily development with specific regulations to support this kind of development on the site. So it's fairly lenient as far as the height of the buildings, maximum 40-meter height, and then you have to meet the standard setbacks, but the rear yard setback is pretty much covered by their riparian area anyways, which has already received approval. And then the front and side yards, 6-meter front yard, 3-meter side yard setbacks. So depending on the proximity to the lot lines, that we could potentially deal with that through minor variances as well, which is also delegated in-house. Only other process would be potentially lot line adjustment subdivision or a new subdivision lot line, and we've already made it pretty obvious that this is a high priority for the city, so that any subdivision process would get expedited through our system to create these parent parcels for development.
Awesome. Thanks, Rod. And thanks for your support with the feasibility study over this past year. James, anything you wanted to add?
No, thanks, Lisa. I thought you and Robin did a great job summarizing it. So really just here to hopefully answer any questions that may come as it relates to citizen services.
Perfect. Okay. The floor is now open for questions. And again, this is your opportunity to ask anything you want. Robin, I'll go to you first. And for people who don't feel comfortable speaking into the meeting, no problem. Please just use the chat. But if you want to ask your question into the meeting, you can do that as well. Robin, did you want to add something? I just saw your hand go up.
Yes, there was one section. We have a community garden plot and a community that is utilizing those plots, it is anticipated that we would be able to retain those and move them somewhere to another location within the site. But I just wanted to mention that the intention is for the project to hopefully retain those community garden plots.
Thank you. Great point. Okay, Les, first question is to you. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify whether you're looking for a single proponent for the entire site, a la 2 buildings, or 2 buildings could be built by 2 proponents that are not the same.
We're looking for a single proponent to take on both phases of the development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And actually, that's a great, if I could just add, it says this in the feasibility study, but we imagine the first building would be under construction in 2025. And then the second building, there is still one active office on site. Those tenants would need to be relocated. And then when they were relocated, that building would be demolished and the second building would be built, which we anticipate to be 2027. So ideally, we have a seamless transition from construction of phase 1 to construction of phase 2. Right, other questions? Raise your hand or use the chat or whatever you feel comfortable. Yeah, Val, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. 186 units, is that phase 1 or is that with the combined phase 1 and 2? You had mentioned the combined, okay.
Phase 1 and 2. We've estimated 93 units per phase.
Okay, and I didn't see the breakdown there because it said it's multifamily or family. So I'm just more curious of what the breakdown is for units, like 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom, bit of both, 3 bedroom.
Yeah, no problem. I can share my screen again. I've got it.
Okay.
Sort of here.
Yeah, I couldn't. One more question too, while she's sharing her screen. Okay, there you go.
And again, this is an estimation.
Right.
We're open to proponents, perhaps.
Okay.
Changing out unit layouts as to how it might suit their potential programming. This is again a feasibility study to assess what the potential yield could be with this sort of built form.
Okay.
Just to add to that, and one of the things I can do at the very end is I'll walk through the scoring criteria. We do allocate, I think, 5% of points for units that can deliver, or proponents that can deliver more family-sized units while still keeping the project viable. So there's just a small scoring that's allocated to that, but this is just initial feasibility. And when you read through the property opportunity notice itself and the scoring criteria, you'll be able to bring your own unit mix that will be able to respond to what we're looking for.
Okay.
And Val, you had one more question.
I had one more question. It might be just because I'm not sure of everyone on the call, and I don't know if you'll have more developers, but I'm coming from the nonprofit lens, and is it in the realm of this application that a nonprofit could partner with 2 different developers? Because I just feel there might not be enough capacity for the nonprofits that there is developers. I'm not sure. So it's just more of a question for us because I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, we want the owner and operator of both buildings to be the same. So would you, in your imagining, is it you are a nonprofit, you would own and operate both buildings, but you'd partner with one developer to do phase 1 and one developer to do phase 2?
No, just on the whole application, if we were approached, for instance, by 2 developers who are putting in an application, because of course only one's going to get it.
Right, I see.
Yeah, that's more just a question. Has that ever happened? Does it happen? Because like I said, there may only be so many nonprofits who feel they have the capacity. There might be more developers interested. So
yeah, that's a fair question. This is a relatively brand new process for us. What I would suggest is that if you are going to be a nonprofit that's approached by 2 developers, that you just have something in writing in both proposals so that everyone is crystal clear, that you are both basically transparency for both the developers. Yeah, we'd be fine with it as long as it's written down and everyone's clear.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's it for me.
Thank you. other questions that people want to ask. And again, if you don't feel comfortable putting up your hand and speaking into the meeting, you can use the chat. But we do want to make sure that we have all of the questions answered while we're here together today.
Okay, Lisa, I have one question, Misa.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for relocation costs, so I'm assuming that these costs would be on the developer and should be reflected in the pro forma, right?
That's a great question. So the I'll talk about demolition and relocation together. The demolition of phase one, we are taking care of because we wanted to keep the project moving. So demolition is happening this summer. The costs are about $3 million for demolition of the two buildings, and they're assumed in the pro forma that the feasibility was built on. The demolition of phase two, it's just, and James can correct me if I'm wrong, there's one larger building and one very small building. So the demolition costs will need to be borne by the project, but the relocation costs of the tenants and the relocation process, James and his team take care of. So James, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or
No,
and did I get it? Okay.
That's a good summary, Lisa. Yeah, SITS would be working with the client ministries to handle the move of the ministry tenants.
Thank you.
Okay, next question from the chat. Is it envisioned that SITS needs all of the commercial space that is planned, or is there a possibility of allocating some of that space for the inclusion of childcare space in the development? I'll let James answer that, but I think we explored that early on in the feasibility.
Yeah, and I think, sort of similar to Lisa and Robin's comments, like obviously open to some value add suggestions. And I think those numbers are sort of the general parameters that we're looking for refinement and creativity from the group here. So happy to be involved. But at the moment, we're envisaging that the majority, if not all of that office target would be allocated to ministry tenants. Yeah.
If I could just add a bit of color to that, there is potential exploration for other sites that are within the precinct where we may be looking at including a daycare. So just to keep that in mind, that need may be met elsewhere.
Thanks, Robin. Les, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Les. And if you're speaking, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I know that these proceedings are being recorded. Will the recording be available?
Absolutely. Yes, it will be up on the website, so you can come back and refer to it. We'll put it up probably by the end of the week.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Yeah, Owen, go ahead.
My question was just around the pre-construction costs for a nonprofit. So I see from the feasibility, it's in like the $4 million range. What sort of support is available for that cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what you're reading from the feasibility study, the $4 million includes the demolition of the existing buildings. So that's an extraordinarily high project development cost, which is being undertaken already. But once I think you might have joined the meeting a little bit later. I don't know if you heard my spiel about the process and the conditional land contribution letter that would be signed between BC Builds, the successful proponent, the City of Kamloops, and the Ministry of Citizen Services. Once that is signed and we're all on a pathway to delivering this project in an expedited fashion, we can provide additional project development funding as a low-cost loan into the project. So that comes kind of post-successful applicant. You would give us a project development budget and include that in your submission if you can, and then that can be forwarded to the proponent during that 1 year period to do, get ready for development permit and so on.
And is there a maximum to that budget amount, or is it just what it costs to get it through that process?
Well, if it's too high, we're going to say that seems kind of suspect. You'll have to do it based on what's real. I mean, we like to gate PDF project development funding starting with about $250,000, see how far that can get you. And then we can obviously, you'll need more to get through development permit, especially for the two buildings. We need to be able to register anything above $500,000 on title. So that would mean that the lease would need to be in place between BC Housing, well, Provincial Regional Housing Corporation, which will actually, or Commission, which will actually own the land, and the proponent. So, sorry, long-winded way of saying yes. I don't want to say we can give you as much as you want, because that would be terrible, and you shouldn't need as much as you want, but you should need as much as you need to get to development permit, building permit. So if it's a reasonable PDF budget and we assess the costs against the other projects that we're working on, that funding can be made available.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no, we realize, and the whole thrust of this program, the portion that we're talking about right now, is to make sure that we're getting community lands to stay in community hands and buildings to be owned and operated by nonprofits. And so we want to make sure that we're providing the resources and support needed to do that. Estimated turnaround time between, what is the estimated turnaround time between application submissions in September and awarding the contract? So just want to be really crystal clear. We're not awarding any contract. This is not a contract. The contracting of construction services, et cetera, will need to be done much further along once there are construction ready drawings. So I just wanted to clarify. I will answer the question. What we're going to do is review the submissions that come in, and then we'll sign what we're calling a conditional land contribution letter, which means the land will be contributed conditionally to the successful proponent, subject to all of us, BC Builds, the landowner, the Kamloops, and the proponent doing all the things we need to do together to get the project to construction. In terms of how long it will take us to evaluate the submissions, well, I mean, it depends on how many come in, but I would say probably a 6-week turnaround is a good assumption. We had an initial series close for 3 sites in the township of Langley at the end of May, and just about finished the process of evaluating those. And that was for 3 sites with lots of proposals. So that's just a bit of a ballpark. Thanks for the question. Other questions? And again, for people who just joined us, if you missed the beginning, don't worry, you can go back and watch the video, which we're going to post on the website. So, and don't worry about asking a question that might have been asked by someone else. It's better to have it asked twice than not at all. So, okay, next question, and thanks for popping them in the chat. Who is responsible for signing the guarantees on the financing, and has any consideration been made to dispose of the lands outright versus a long-term lease model? Second part of the question first, no. These will be, BC Builds projects will, unless the landowner specifies, always on a long-term lease, which as long as it's more than 60 years is financeable. And then the question about who is responsible for signing the guarantees on the financing. I want a bit more clarity. Do you mean who, like if a nonprofit is partnering with a private developer, do you mean who between the nonprofit and the private developer? Or maybe you could just put a bit more clarity into the question about, or ask it into the meeting, whatever your preference is.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, just for clarity. So yeah, if we're a developer, so if we were partnering with a nonprofit, you guys are providing 100% construction financing, debt financing on the project. Who is responsible for signing the guarantees? Is it the partnership, or is it just the developer? Does it matter, or how's that? What's the preference with that?
I think the preference would be for the developer to hold the construction financing, and to do the guarantees for the financing. And then basically it would be like kind of a forward sale to the nonprofit. So they would assume the turnkey building at the end, with a, developer profit built in there, or developer builder profit.
Are they limited guarantees or unlimited?
Robin, do you know? I don't know the answer to that.
Can you sort of specify what you mean by limited or unlimited?
Limited in terms of their ceiling level. Is there $10 million guarantee on a $50 million project, or do you have to guarantee the whole 50 million? Just in terms of, I'm just trying to understand risk profile on the project. That's all.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it would be part and parcel with how the budget is structured and the capital stack. Like as part of the program, 225,000 per door is provided in terms of equity, but it's not necessarily an open check. Like BC Housing goes through several approval processes by which like financing is secured, verified. We use quantity surveyors to double check that all of the project budgets are sort of in line with market expectations. We have our BC Housing internal construction team that also sort of verifies the drawing sets as it's sort of going through different levels of review, and then capital budget is effectively finalized at what called final project approval. So it goes through like multiple tranches of both design evolution, capital budget evolution, and they sort of evolve part and parcel as the project moves forward. Effectively, no one knows what the takeout is until you're through construction, because timelines and other sort of red herrings can always pop up, but effectively the budget is sort of finalized at FPA. So just before effectively you go into the ground.
Yeah,
I totally understand that. My question was based more around, is there personal guarantees required from the developer side as it relates? So if we were to partner with, say, a nonprofit, and we've got if this is a 50 or 80 or $100 million project, are we personally guaranteeing the whole 100, or are we personally guaranteeing it to 10 or 15, or how does the...
why don't we, I don't want to give a wrong answer. So what we'll do is we'll go away, we'll get that answer definitively. And then for everyone here and everyone that comes after, we'll add, and Allie, this is for you, we'll put it in there'll be an appendix to the property opportunity notice. And this is actually a good process thing to mention. Over the next couple months, people will have thought of questions that no one thought of today and that no one's asked yet. And we will get that information, and then we'll update the property opportunity notice with that information. When it is updated, you'll see it flagged on the site as updated, and you'll also get a note, hey, there's new information available about this proposal. So great question, Gary. We want to make sure we give you an absolutely precise answer. So we'll get that answer, and then we'll update the property opportunity notice.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Next question in the chat. Can you further explain the transfer to a nonprofit owner? Is the expectation for a developer to partner with a nonprofit at the time of application, or can that be completed afterwards? That must be completed as part of the application, because the only thing that makes those grants available, that up to $225,000 per unit, is having a nonprofit partner. So that you need that nonprofit partnership at the outset, at the time of application. Invitation to others to continue to ask questions. Either turn on your camera or use the chat.
I have another question, Lisa. With respect to offices, is there any other requirement from the Ministry of Citizenship for the specific design of the office, or just we need to follow the just BC building code requirements, and there is no requirement from them? In other words, we need to just deliver the shell and then leave the fit out to them, or any specific requirements from them?
Great
would
question.
Be in place.
James, over to you.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Lisa. What has been requested, as I understand, in the opportunity notice, is just to assume construction of the shell by the developer, and then Citizen Services would work to do the tenant improvements. There are some accessibility standards for provincial offices should be available, but for this point, for pricing, just price out the shell, and we would be working with the preferred proponent to refine the design as needed for anything further.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions? And again, feel free to use the chat or ask right into the meeting if that's easier for you.
Just one quick question. I went through a bit, I went through a bit on pro forma on the bottom line provided by Faction. So I'm wondering whether, is there any reason for them to consider 10% for contingency. That's a bit quite high. I couldn't find any specific reason in their feasibility study. I'm wondering whether they can have that answer for us. What is the reason for 10% contingency? Is there anything high risk they had considered before populating this report, or anything else? We would be happy to hear that.
I can answer that one. That's just pretty much BC housing standard at this early stage in design. We anticipate we just buffer in a larger contingency to account for everything from construction inflation to design costs and evolution, to any sort of site conditions that were potentially missed or unconsidered. As we refine the budget, contingency drops systematically to sort of account for the de-risking of the project.
Okay, but out of my experience, majority of BC housing project at the very starting point, they consider something between 5 to maximum 7. But 10% is quite new to me. But if there, my question specifically is not anything special that you had considered here to just push it up.
No, it's just a very, very high level analysis. And so a lot of unknowns. But that reminds me to tell all of you that we have had a geotechnical assessment of the site done. Faction is just finishing it up, and that will be added very soon to the property opportunity notice. So just that will be coming, that we didn't have it quite ready. We didn't want to delay the opportunity, but that will be there for everyone to look at as well. And one more thing that I'll say that is clear in the property opportunity notice, and particularly please everyone read the BC Build's rental supply program framework. We put the link in there about 3 times. We want everyone to read it because that tells you about the program and our expectations. But Misiam was talking about BC housing projects. This is a BC Builds project. Yes, it's housed at BC Housing, but we just need projects built to building code. We don't need projects, and we don't want projects built to the BC housing design guidelines, just to BC building code. That's and thanks, Ali. Ali just put the rental supply framework for the fourth time. You could see the link in the chat. We really did put it 3 times in the property opportunity notice because we want you to read it. All right. Anyone want to ask anything further?
I just had one more quick question, and forgive me if it's in the package here. I'm just getting up to speed on it. But on as it relates to the takeout financing, is the rate fixed up front when you go to get your construction financing?
Oh, that is
able to fix it?
That's a great question. The answer to that is both yes and no. In other words, it depends. So with BC, just a straight BC Builds project, no. The takeout happens at the end of construction, and we batch all of the loans that we have and put them out to the market and get projected rates, which are currently up on the site. I think it's, I'll go look when I'm finished talking, but we project for 2027 somewhere below 4. So if it's just straight through BC Builds, we can't lock in the financing at construction draw. However, and this is laid out in the property opportunity notice, BC Builds also has a direct pathway to apartment construction loan program financing through CMHC. So while if you're just outside of BC Builds and you submit your ACLP application to CMHC, you're competing against all the other projects in Canada. You're being scored on all their criteria. We have kind of a direct path to ACLP, which would be available potentially after that successful proponent selected and we figure out what's the best financing approach. In that case, yes, if we go the ACLP route, the rate is fixed at the first draw of construction. That was a long-winded way of answering your question, but I wanted to be clear that there are 2 pathways. And again, if everyone can build their pro forma with a 35-year amortization assumption and the rates that are on our website, and then, once we've got the successful proponent selected, we'll work together with you and with CMHC to try and get through the ACLP door, which is, they've got a better interest rate than we do, and it's a 50-year amortization, which means that we can hit the same kinds of rents with less cash injection from BC Builds.
Great.
And yeah, Ally's just put the rates up there. Thanks, Ally. Both the construction and takeout rates. Okay, anything else that anyone wants to ask? Okay, I'm going to assume that everyone has enough information to put in awesome proposals. Is that a fair assumption? All right. I'll just go over what happens from here. So there is a very detailed feasibility study that some of you have gestured towards and read through. Do have a look at that. There's a lot of information in there. This is our most advanced proposal. In other cases, it's just like, here's some land, bring us your best options, which I guess there's some good to that. But this, I think you've got a lot to work with. Really want to stress that the preferred option is really the preferred option. That second building drawn back away from the courthouse is really important to the Ministry of Attorney General and the justices. So we're roughly within that kind of footprint. I mean, it doesn't need to be exactly. We're looking for some creativity. Really important point. If you have questions that come up after this info session, please email them to info@bcbuildshomes.ca. And if it's a question that can be answered by directing you back to the website or to this info session, we will do that. But as I said earlier, if it's something that you've asked that provides information that everybody needs, we will update the property opportunity notice right at the end of the text before the feasibility study, and Ally will send a note saying, hey, new information available, because this really needs to be a fair and transparent process for everybody involved. So that's how that works. So if you have questions, just use that one email address. Don't email me, don't email James, don't email Robin. We've got a good process to make sure that everyone gets the same information back so that it's fair. And with that, submissions are due on the 20th of September, no later than that. The latest we've had a submission come in is 11:50 p.m. So all the way up to 11:59 is fine. Earlier the better. Yeah, I think that's it, unless anyone had any final questions or any of my colleagues wanted to share anything further. Okay, well, thanks very much for your time today, and we really look forward to receiving your proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.